Okay, so I'll give just a short introduction about us as the Green Building Council, and then I'll hand it over to you. אז שלום לכולם, אני רואה שיש פה הרבה אנשים, וזה כיף גדול, אנחנו כבר על 42 משתתפים. אז נעים מאוד, אני גיא, רכז מחקר ופיתוח במועצה הישראלית לבנייה ירוקה. אנחנו בעצם עמותה למטרות רווח, שמטרתה לקדם בכל הרמות, החל מהממשלה ועד לרשויות המקומיות ואפילו האדם הפרטי, את העניין והתחום של בנייה ירוקה, גם ברמת הבניין, גם ברמת המרחב הציבורי בכלל, לקדם מרחב נגיש, בריא ובר קיימא בישראל. אז היום אנחנו מציגים בפניכם את פיליפ פרונר, אני מקווה שאני אומר, I hope I'm saying it right, שהוא מנהל פרויקטים בהאפנסיטי שבהמבורג שבגרמניה, אז תכף הוא יספר לנו מה הוא עושה. בעצם המועצה הכירה אותו בסיור האחרון בהמבורג, שהיה לפני שנתיים, ובעצם מאוד התרשמנו ממנו, והנה הוא פה לפניכם שוב, אז אני מקווה שתהנו. Okay, Philip, so I think we can start. People are coming slowly in still, but I think, you know, time is of the essence. And we should say, so the lecture will be 45 minutes. And afterwards, people, you can write in the chat questions that you have, and we will try to answer as much as we can within the last 15 minutes of the lecture until about 6 o'clock. And the rest, which we won't be able to answer, we will try to answer by sending Philip the questions, and hopefully he might have some answer to some of the questions. So let's begin. Philip, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Philipp Preuner. I work for HafenCity Hamburg GmbH, and I'm in the project of HafenCity, but also in one major other project called Grasbrook. One out of 4 projects that we are responsible for. I start to share my screen in order to show you. Yes, I hope you can see that in the presentation mode.
Yeah, I can see it. I hope everybody can. If you have problems seeing the presentation, try looking for a tab in the screen saying switch to show previewed content or something like that. It should be in the upper left side. אוקיי, אז מי שלא מצליח לראות את המצגת, שיחפש כפתור במסך, בפינה השמאלית למעלה. כתוב עליו switch to previewed content או משהו כזה דומה. בסדר? מקווה שכולכם מסתדרים. אוקיי, פיליפ.
Okay. So thank you again for the invitation. I wish best regards from Hamburg. I think some of you actually know myself and the city well, as you have visited the area a while ago before the pandemic. And so Hamburg is the second largest city in Germany and about a little bit more than 100 kilometers away from the coast to the North Sea, and it's also Europe's third largest port still. And so this picture shows you the proximity to the North Sea, because I want to talk a little bit also about sea level rise as part of the climate change adaptation strategies. Zooming into Hamburg, you can see here the River Elbe coming from the North Sea, going up to Germany and the Czech Republic, with the city center of Hamburg in the middle. And the agency I work for is owned by the city of Hamburg and is responsible for HafenCity, which is an inner city waterfront development. And then another area, Billebogen, which is also quite centrally located, but in comparison to the HafenCity, it's not a port transformation, it's a regeneration project of an existing commercial light industrial area in the Hamburg's east area. The third project that we manage is Grasbrook. It's, so to say, the southern extension of HafenCity. It's also built on former port land, and it builds on the experiences of HafenCity in terms of urban structure, mobility, infrastructure, and resilience strategies. And the fourth project that we do is the Science City, a project in the northwest of Hamburg, which aims at changing a very much science and research dominated area to a mixed-use quarter that becomes more attractive in terms of like a research and residential community. Looking at the big challenge of planetary boundaries and climate change, biodiversity, we have tried to look at the timeline of how we can actually reach the climate goals based on a publication of Rockström, a roadmap for rapid decarbonization, which says that there is like a phase of no-brainers at the moment, consistent use of existing regulatory instruments, and the need to stop annual growth in CO2 emissions. And it is necessary to actually have an intelligent, disruptive phase in the 2020s. Cities will take a pioneering role within that transformation, and we have to halve the CO2 emissions at least in this time. And then already in the 2030s, so-called breakthroughs is when we as city planners or urban designers, landscape designers, we have to already be able to scale up CO2 neutral or even CO2 negative quarters. So based on this theory from science in 2017, we have tried to show a little bit along that timeline what we did as HafenCity for this sustainability transformation. We have heat infrastructure, heat supply infrastructure that has very low CO2 benchmarks. It had quite normal ones in the beginning. We started in the Western HafenCity, and the further we developed the area until east, the benchmark also has been much better, has become much better. We have also advanced the building certificate. We have an eco label for buildings introduced in 2007, and it has been improved, and the standard has become mandatory in 2017. And also we have revised the master plan, which, for example, has had impact on the density of the area, on the land use question of emissions and sustainability, and some other things too. And you can see here that we start now with the new projects. One example of an improvement or an increase of standards is the level of flood secure infrastructure. As we have the title change also in Hamburg, it is necessary to look at the changes of the sea level rise. Some of you might know this study by Horton et al. From last year, which is an interesting study, as it is aggregating hundreds of sea level rise studies and concludes on like an aggregation of all those studies and findings in the research community. And it says in an optimistic scenario that the probability is very high that sea level rises about 0.5 meter by 2100, and in the rather pessimistic scenario, it rises up to, the probability is very high that it rises to up to 1 meter. Why do we look at that so closely? We do have a flood protection system in HafenCity that is very integrated in the urban structure and in the urban design of the area. It is based on the leveling up of the street level onto a flood secure level from the historic level, which is left on the promenade side. So the promenade is left on the historic level, and we level up onto the streets and the sidewalks to the flood secure level. And in between we have we fill this space with a level in the buildings that is usually publicly accessible on the promenade side, and is also largely used for underground parking for cars or bikes. So this concept has been already realized in HafenCity with a flood secure level of about 8 meters 60, but according to the new projections, we have to reconsider this kind of height now for the new areas. In order to make the new areas safe, we go up to 10 meters with the street level. The photos show you how it looks, how the system looks like in the normal case. So if there is no storm surge, which happens about 2 or 3 times a year, then we have this normal case, which is then flooded on the promenade level in the storm surge case. Another aspect of the sustainability structure is that I want to highlight is, of course, green urban infrastructure, as we do not only talk about CO2 emissions and also not only about adaptation in terms of flooding. It's very important to create very qualitative and multi-purpose use green spaces. These are pictures of the 3 main green spaces, the parks in HafenCity, which are used for sports and play, for infiltration, retention of rainwater, and of course for also the increased biodiversity in terms of animal habitats. this is an aerial photo of the area of HafenCity, which how it looks at the moment. So you have a view from the western side. This is already all finished. It was the first area. And then you have construction sites that are currently on the way. They are still going on quite in a normal pace during the pandemic. And here we have central HafenCity, and in the back area, you could also look onto the second picture, which shows the eastern HafenCity. So we have a park in the middle, and this is also the point I want to make with this photo. Parks and green spaces are the ones that we realized in the beginning. So you can see the parks is already finalized. It is accessible through the promenade by school kids and other leisure users, but the construction sites are still very much going on around that. So you can see that HafenCity is, in terms of planning, quite through. So all the plans in terms of urban design, of landscape design, of investor competitions, architectural competitions are already done. It's about finishing and constructing now there. That's why we as a city-owned development company, we focus on another area that is just next to HafenCity. You can see HafenCity here on the right side. And across River Elbe, there is another piece of the port area that has been transferred to us last year. And we did a competition for that area then. The competition is interesting for in terms of the sustainability strategy from a more like a governance or process point of view, as it was organized in such a way that landscape design has been leveled to the same eye level as urban design. So we did not do a tender for urban design and the urban designers then came with the landscape designers. No, we did a competition that in the first phase, all the urban designers and landscape designers could think about the area completely free and think from their disciplinary perspective freely about the area. Then we chose half of the applicants and we matched them. So there were offices working together in the second phase that were not really familiar with each other, which was and they already had their own perspective on their area from the beginning. So it was on a quite fresh perspective by the planners, by the architectural offices too, on this new area. And then we did a decision in April last year, and we since then we have a very intensive planning, functional and landscape planning phase together with the winners, which were Herzog de Meuron for the urban design and Vogt for the landscape design. So what are the overall aims for this new area, being like an advancement and a further development of HafenCity? We have, on the one hand side, we have the physical innovations. I mentioned the city structure, so we have of course a high inner city density, horizontal and vertical mix of uses, the green urban structure, the flood protection system. We have a mobility system that focuses very much on public transport, car sharing, and bikes and pedestrians. The sustainable mobility aspect of it is also easier compared to HafenCity, as it is not as it does not serve as a transit area for the inner city. We have big streets in HafenCity because of many cars are forced to drive through the area, but in Grasbrook we have the chance to do it more car-free. It will not be totally car-free, of course, but it will be a very low modal split in terms of cars. The infrastructure, we think about a media channel that combines the water, energy, waste infrastructure in an underground channel that is technology open, and it is easier to exchange infrastructures in the futures, which gives flexibility for the long-term lifespan of the infrastructures. We have, of course, then also high ambitions in terms of buildings design with a lot of wood construction, but also recycling concrete and many other concepts that, for example, also focus on like a district-wide green facade concept that the landscapers currently design. The socio-economic innovations is something that we can also build on very much from the HafenCity development. There is a high diversity of housing. We have market-based housing, but also cooperative housing in up to a third of the total housing housing amount, and then this is combined with the new work environments that also are being analyzed at the moment in terms of the impacts of the pandemic, but the general concept in terms of an area that is planned for 6,000 residents and 16,000 jobs is, from our perspective, a robust mix of uses that is also future-proof and is not too office-focused. It's also a lot of spaces in this area also for research development and urban production, vertically organized production, which is more resilient than the office spaces there at the moment. Of course, the ground floor use system and the which aims at a counter capacity in the streets, and then resident networks and community houses in the parks, all kinds of different socio-economic interventions to make this new district also vibrant, which is the big challenge for large-scale urban interventions like that. And the process innovation, one of them I already mentioned with the design competition, but there's also new ways of thinking of monitoring the sustainability of the area, integrated between buildings and infrastructure. Monitoring often takes place either for buildings or certain fragments of infrastructure, but we want to, as the overall goal of the district is CO2 neutrality over the whole life cycle, we want to have a picture of gray energy and operational energy throughout the whole buildings and infrastructure, which is something that we work on now in order to also be able to monitor that. And what is being used to do that, for example, is the BIM technology. Another process innovation is that we did that the competition already produced a city, like a district-wide BIM model. So we have building information modeling on a district scale from the very beginning of the development, which we think has a lot of potential in terms of monitoring also sustainability aspects, and not only costs or construction details. These are some impressions now about the physical innovations that I already quickly mentioned. We have, of course, in this area a wide strategy of preserving the water-related areas of open space. We have a big park in the middle, a long so-called Volkspark, a long and rectangle park that has proven quite successful in HafenCity, where we have one such park which is very well used already. And then there is a promenade system again, which interrelates with the flood protection system. What is something that we integrate in the planning process at the moment very early is water cycles. So we have the buildings, the green facades, the green roofs, but also the open spaces, the parks, the streets that serve as suppliers of water and also as infiltration and retention potential of rainwater, and that is aimed to be as much as like regenerative as possible, although we are in the middle of the river actually. So this topic is not so much about flooding, it's more about using as little as possible fresh water for watering the green areas, for example, and the green facades. Another aspect is the mobility system. Of course, I already mentioned that we have an extension of the subway, which is quite good to have a central subway station. Interesting for the mobility system is that we plan to accommodate all the parking underground in a central parking garage, and so we can actually save the gray energy for underground parking garages for most of the building areas. And this is the red line is then shows where the media channel that I mentioned should be laid underground in order to provide maximum flexibility for infrastructures. As the heat island effect is steadily increasing, this is a map in Hamburg that compares 2010 to 2050 protections. This is, as in many other urban development interventions at the moment, a big challenge to deal with this. So we try to deal with this increase in microclimate, besides all these parks and water cycle interventions, also with the idea of an integrated street section, so to say. So there are so many aspects within a street section related to the underground area, to the building area, and the streets itself. And it's quite challenging to integrate all that sustainability aspects within such a dense area that also works for the number of people who will live there. So one aspect, for example, is tree placement. We tried to go down to about 6 meters tree distance. I think it was almost double so far by law in terms that, because it is of course related to the fire regulations. But if we look at the buildings, how the fire regulations are differently approached, and we are able to have more trees in the streets. This is of course in conflict with the underground area of retention, but it's also in conflict with the parking spaces. So we place all the parking spaces, as I said before, underground centrally, which also enables more trees and also enables us to place technical functions like storage, energy storage facilities, or water cleaning facilities, and also bike parking facilities underground in one underground level. The second underground level, that is conventional in the normal case, as you can see in the left picture in Hamburg, is saved through the reduction of car parking and also the central location of car parking. I already mentioned CityBeam as an important tool, not only for the coordination and for the troubleshooting, but also for the monitoring of the integrated sustainability monitoring, for example, which is something we explore at the moment. We have the model, but monitoring the sustainability flows in an integrated manner using the model is nothing that we do already. It's something that we try to set up now for this new area. What we have also done throughout the competition, but also now, is to develop new simulation tools for planning in order to have a better evidence-based planning and a more standardized comparison of different topics like water, like noise, like these kind of heat maps that we have for also walkability. This one shows now the pedestrian flows. Have a standardized and a comparable simulation tool to plan open spaces and also infrastructure and buildings better in the future. This is a tool that we developed along the process, so we did not already apply it. We tried to develop it together with academic partners. On the building scale, the state of the art already in HafenCity is to look at the full life cycle of buildings. We do as the focus on the operation and use phase of building has been so big in the last decades and has made it to decrease this energy use very much. Now the focus goes more into the planning implementation phase, where we have almost or more than 50% of the whole total CO2 emissions of a building. And we want to bring that down through recycling materials. We also talk to steel producers. We talk to recycling concrete producers, and then match them with the building, the project developers and the architects. So we as urban development company do see us also as someone who matches different approaches of engineering approaches and sustainability strategies between different actors. And in order to have lower gray energy, a negative balance for the use phase, and then have a zero emission, net zero emission building after the life cycle. And we do this already. I go back now with the area to HafenCity. So these are current projects in HafenCity, Moringa, for example, that is under construction. And you can see that this is the move that we are doing already in HafenCity, in the last buildings there now, and will also be the direction for Grasbrook. And those kind of buildings are not only like high cost housing, high price housing, also they are always mixed use. They are always based on a quite socially mixed and land use mixed concept. So in this example, we have subsidized housing, 36%, we have co-living, co-working, and then market-based, free market price flats. And this kind of mixed-use concept also can make it possible to have a green facade to improve the microclimate drastically within this project, and decrease the temperature and improve the cooling, improve biodiversity, improve the local air quality as a building scale approach that is embedded in the district scale approaches that I mentioned before for the Grasbrook project. One key instrument for that is our eco-label since 2007, which is mandatory for all since 2017. And the base of the experiences that we make with projects like this, they then are being transformed into a standard through the eco-label, which is an own, one might ask why we do have our own eco-label. It is actually something that is already quite harmonized with the DGNP certificate. But one reason back then was that there was no German eco-label, so HafenCity just implemented its own. And another reason was that there is many ways and aspects where it makes sense to actually incorporate site-specific aspects like the energy infrastructure, CO2 coefficient as a trade-off of heat insulation, for example, which can be easier and more agile with our own eco-label. So the last few slides are again about governance and about instruments and planning strategies. Here you can see again the whole Hamburg area, and the gray area is the port. So you can see here in the center, the HafenCity and Grasbrook, which are quite small compared to the whole port area. So we have this discussion of this, which is also there in Rotterdam, for example, or in many other port cities, about the interrelation and the relationship between port and city. And our projects, HafenCity and Grasbrook, are just next to this area. Managing these kind of areas through a city-owned agency is something that has become quite popular. We are in Hamburg. It's not only we are not the only agency of such a kind, There is also IBA Hamburg that manages these blue areas. And then there are other instruments like innovation districts and special coordination zones. The main aim for this kind of territorially focused and also entrepreneurial integrated urban development is that we have a long-term perspective of urban development that is, of course, integrated in terms of interdisciplinary work, but also in terms of economic and financial, from an economic point of view, as we are independent from tax money, widely independent from tax money. It is the land value that we operate with. So we have a realized financial income. It's just, this is the income that we generate through land sales to private investors. And this realized financial income we directly reinvest into a public infrastructure in the same area. And there is also a big part, and this is especially interesting for the sustainability strategy, namely a non-realized financial income. So this means from the potential land value that we could actually generate in that very well located inner city land, we do not realize all that. So we sell the land not for the maximum price. We actually sell it for a lower price, but therefore have a lot of obligations to the investor in terms of sustainability, quantitative, qualitative topics that they have to incorporate in the buildings, which relates to architectural quality, publicly related ground floor uses, of course the price structure, like rent caps or subsidized housing in certain areas of the building, cultural institutions that we match with them, and of course the mobility, the car sharing system that is placed underground in the buildings. So they have to make their underground parking areas accessible to the whole district citizens. These kind of things are incorporated through the land sales agreement, the purchase agreement, and is justified as a area-wide transfer of quality of like public good into public values into private goods. So this is the combined strategy in order to reach the sustainability goals in infrastructure, but also in buildings in an integrated way and in a quite economically independent way, but still in the name of the city of Hamburg. And yeah, that's what I also want to end with. Took a little bit less than planned, but I think then we have a little bit more time for questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Very, very, very interesting. Okay, so let's see. כולם, מי שלא היה בהתחלה, אז אמרתי לכתוב שאלות בצ'אט, ואני עכשיו אעביר את השאלות. אז the first question we have here is, maybe you can see it, but anyway, I'll read it out so everybody can hear it. A wonderful project, but how is it related to those new trends as how working and public necessary dispersion as a mandatory rule since COVID-19. Okay, I'm guessing the larger question here is how do you tackle COVID-19 and the new rules that you might have in your city or the new behavings that come out of this?
Yeah. Well, the general answer is that we think, at the moment, we think that the diversified and resilience-oriented urban development that we do, or we did before the pandemic, is resilient enough to actually cope with this pandemic. So we don't think that major adaptation will be necessary, as we have a very mixed use structure. We have a quite secured financing structure. We are independent of the tax revenues that are going down now in the city, as we are, as I just described, do this financial model independently. Of course, there will be some adaptation. Some buildings will take probably a little bit longer, but so far we are still in time quite well. And there will also be adaptation in terms of the office spaces and in terms of the use of certain office spaces for other uses like cultural uses or manufacturing or co-working spaces and so on. But also within the buildings, the flexibility should be there to cope with the pandemic so far. That's our message.
Yeah, okay, that's great. A second question, Gershon, I'll skip on your second question because there are some other people and we possibly will come back to it. Parking in the building is open for the public. How are the usual mixed how are the uses mixed in the building? Also industry, not offices. Okay, so I hope you understood the question.
Well, the parking in the building is open for the public only in buildings that have a supermarket in the ground floor, for example. But in the major part of the area opens up the underground parking only for the residents of the district. That's the idea.
So how do they remove? How did you manage to remove the parkings from the street level? Basically, where do people put the car when they come? I don't know, come around to meet friends or go to work. All the work offices have underground parkings, I believe.
Yeah, offices have underground parking too. And also there is some parking in HafenCity in the streets, but much less. So the philosophy is rather to have a very low amount of cars and a very good public transportation system.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the answer. Basically, for some of us, it's hard to understand because there isn't here such a good public transportation, and then the question is obvious to us.
Yeah.
But when there is a good public transportation system, then there's no problem. Okay, third question. Hi, can you please elaborate about mixed uses in HafenCity and Grasbrook, percentage of housing and offices? Okay, so basically what's, how much business is in there?
Yeah. Well, in HafenCity we have 45,000 jobs and 15,000 residents. But if you look at the ground floor area, GFA, then it's about half-half. So it's about half offices, half residential spaces. And on top of that, of course, cultural spaces, educational spaces, and other commercial spaces.
Yeah.
and Grasbrook is quite the same. So it's very similar in terms of the mixture. It is a little bit more commercial because we have a lot of areas in Grasbrook that are close to port and street areas which are very noisy. So there will be more urban production and laboratories and research facilities and stuff like that. But the balance between office and residential is similar, half-half.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that's quite a lot of business. Yeah. What are the obligations of the private investors in the long term with regards to the lower land prices that they are receiving? Okay, so I think you answered it, but maybe we'll run over it again. How do their obligations carry over to the next generation? That's interesting.
Yeah, that's really a good question. There are some obligations that that have to be carried over, as they are obligations that are kind of prescribed in the built environment, like the ground floor height. But topics like capped rents or topics like specific use obligation, they are usually only about 20 to maximum 30 years obligation. So then they are not really handed over to the following owners or to the following users, which is based on the idea that after that period of time, the area is already a city, like a kind of a city area that is part of the old city and works with the citywide systems.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a good, very important and crucial topic, how to actually save those obligations or secure them. And I have to add quickly that the Grasbrook project will have a different approach. We will not sell the plots anymore freehold. We will most likely do long-term leases so that the city can take them back after 80 or 100 years.
Yeah. And what are some of the examples for obligations? Like a quick few examples of such obligations?
Well,
the private,
for example, half of the roof area is green roof, or for like certain energy standards, or the ground floor things that I mentioned, or this mobility system. So you have to convince investors, of course, and find a common awareness about this mobility system, to find someone who accepts that obligation of reducing the parking spaces by half and then opening up these remaining ones to the rest of the district residents.
Okay, great. Another question, I'm not sure I understand it, but I'll try, I'll just say it out loud. Can you explain the media channel? Is it strong internet as an essential infrastructure? Did you understand the question?
I think it's about digital infrastructure, which is a big topic in Grasbrook, in the new area, not so much in HafenCity. And in Grasbrook, there will be, like, the recommendation by our communication and digital infrastructure partners are that we have glass fiber in a redundant way, in a redundant logic for all the buildings, of course. So yes, it is very important, I think, and I think this is also something that no one will be skeptic about anymore after the pandemic.
Yeah, okay, excellent. What's the time? We have some time. Can you talk about the relations with the Ort?
The port?
Ort. Yeah, I guess it's the port. Okay, but you kind of answered it. Okay, give us a quick brief, maybe. Port, Ort. I guess it's port.
Well, the relations with the port is that they are responsible for the water basins also that go into HafenCity and Grasbrook.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with them when we plan the public spaces next to the water. Also, another aspect is for energy infrastructure. Port produces hydrogen, so if we do, and it's not fixed yet, but if we do hydrogen energy supply in Grasbrook, then it would also be like a link to the port. Yeah, these kind of things. But generally, it's actually it's not so integrated, the port area and the city area.
Okay, good question, good answer. Gershon, again, there is not milestones and feedback stations in the project, no rethinking, no checkpoints. It seems a linear project. Well, I guess you didn't tell us the project.
Well, yeah, I did not highlight this so much this time, but there is some feedback loops, of course. There's feedback loops for the building development. So, of course, we learn with the building projects and then incorporate those learnings in the next projects, just in a processual way, and also by updating the eco-label. Then on a master plan level, we did an update 10 years after the master plan. So the master plan was made in the year 2000. And in the year 2010, the master plan was updated very radically in terms of density, as the experience of the first 10 years has shown that there can be more density. The project is successful, there can be more density, and it should be more density. The update also, for example, was about public transport. There was not so much, there was no underground line or public transport in the beginning. So public transport was added in 2010, and also the street surface share was quite lowered, and the green space share was increased during that master plan update. So these are the main points, I think, of learning. I hope this is what you meant with the feedback stations.
Yeah, I think to me it's a very good answer. Please share a bit about micro-mobility integration.
Well,
like it's talk that they mean bikes and stuff like this.
Yeah. Well, there is, of course, in the mobility concept for Grasbrook, I cannot say that there's anything like a concept for micro-mobility in HafenCity, but for Grasbrook, it is part of the strategy. The distances between certain stations and actors, like users, they are much shorter, they are much flexible, they are on demand, and they are also integrated with micro-mobility possibilities that we have today. But I'm sorry, I cannot go into more detail. I don't know more about that at the moment.
Yeah, but okay, that's a good question, a good answer. How and from where do you get 10 meters of soil fill? That's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess it's from digging all the parking lots underground, possibly.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's an important sustainability question, as it is, as the sand is scarce. But that, yeah, I don't really know, but I would like to find it out for you.
Okay, great. So hopefully an answer will come Okay, the time is, so let's take the last question, and the rest of the questions we'll send you, and hopefully you'll have some time to respond us back. And so,
Okay.
are building at the level of the passive houses, the typical building block you showed with the greenery inside does seem to be well naturally ventilated. Who takes care of all the building integrated greenery? Okay.
The building owner.
The building owner. And that's for, you said, for at least like 20 years, like mandatory, from what I understood. And what happens if he doesn't do it?
Then well, if you don't comply with the obligations, then you have you have to do payments, like fines. You have contractually agreed fines on that, and how long this obligation is for green facades, I don't know by heart now, but it is definitely the building owner. We also have spaces that are privately owned but publicly accessible in the long term, and also the private owner is responsible to take care of them.
Okay, so that's it. I just copied the rest of the questions, so hopefully we can answer them, but there's not a lot anyways, so it's okay. Thank you, Philip, very much. It was super interesting. I myself have some questions, but the time is out, so I might tell my questions as well. It was a great meeting you. And thank you all your participants that came. We were up to 78, if I'm not mistaken, participants, so it was very productive. Thank you a lot again, and see you soon.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and let's keep in touch.
Yes.
Looking forward to your questions.
Cool, thank you a lot.
All the best, stay safe.
See you.
Healthy.
לכולם, להתראות.